Dynasty Warriors Gundam is one of those series I just have such fond memories of. It's a franchise that I thought I loved unconditionally, until I actually went back and played all four of the games again in 2025. And here's the thing, the first one is way worse than I remember. It's clunky, awkward, and has really strange combat system mechanics that just feel dated and old even by Dynasty Warriors standards. But somehow, through fixes, experiments, and one final course correction, this series quietly turned into one of my favorite Gundam game experiences of all time. So today, I want to talk about Dynasty Warriors Gundam and how it went from a fairly embarrassing and rough first entry to having some well-regarded sequels with many fans even today, and why I think Dynasty Warriors Gundam should get another shot, considering how many collaborations that Koei Tecmo and Omega Force are doing these days. Either way, keep it locked here for this retrospective of Dynasty Warriors Gundam. Over the last few videos, I've been replaying all four Dynasty Warriors Gundam games. This is a series that I've always had a strange attachment to. Even as a Dynasty Warriors fan, and even as a Gundam fan especially, these games stand out in particular for me. They're just something I can always go back to and have fond memories of. And honestly, these games are a bit messy, they're uneven, some are deeply flawed in a very mid-2000s Koei Tecmo kind of way, but at the same time, there's not much else like them. Dynasty Warriors Gundam is a crossover that probably should not work as well as it does. Gundam is a franchise that is built on war stories, political themes, character drama, and tragedy. But Dynasty Warriors is all about spectacle, excess, and turning one character who's very beautiful into a small army. And yet, somehow across four games, Omega Force managed to make something that, while imperfect, feels pretty sincere. You can feel the developers learning, adjusting, and responding to feedback with each entry. This isn't a video that's just going to be like ranking the games. I wanted to do a full look back, a retrospective so to speak, looking at how the series evolved, how it was received at release, and how sentiment changed over time, and why these games are remembered maybe more fondly now than when they came out back in the day. On paper, the idea makes kinda sense. Gundam already has massive battlefields, iconic aces, endless grunt enemies, and absurd power scaling at times. Those elements fit perfectly into what the Musou formula is. The series was developed by Omega Force, the same team behind Dynasty Warriors. Early on, this project was very obviously a proof of concept. Could Gundam's fantasy survive being translated into a gameplay style that's traditionally built around historical warlords? One of the biggest challenges had to have been the narrative structure. Unlike Romance in the Three Kingdoms or Sengoku-era Japan, Gundam spans dozens of timelines and universes. Early entries clearly struggled on how they were going to present a coherent story while also sticking to the UC era storyline that we all know and love. It also helps explain why the first games feel so scattered in tone and don't really stick to one way or the other, it seems. Across the series though, you can see that Omega Force is slowly starting to shift priorities, away from the strict story recreation and more towards the spectacle, grind, and fan celebration of what Gundam is. Coming back to Dynasty Warriors Gundam 1 completely surprised me, and not in the good way. I remember this being pretty rough back in the day, but replaying it all these years later really shocked me at how bad it just felt. Even by older Dynasty Warriors standards, this one feels pretty dated. Visually, it's fine-ish, everything looks how it should look. It's serviceable, but nothing really sells the fantasy of Gundam. The real problem though was the gameplay. The combat feels awful. Combos do not link naturally, the move pool barely expands in a meaningful way, Instead of learning new charge attacks, the game mostly just doubles and then triples your basic square combo. It never actually evolves, which makes the already slow pacing feel even worse, honestly. Also, the stages just drag on way too long. Enemy encounters lack rhythm, and the game rarely gives you that satisfying Musou flow state. That said, I do want to give Dynasty Warriors Gundam 1 some credit. The original mode has some fun character team-up stories and cutscenes. Those dream collaborations hints at what could have been a really interesting part of the series once the gameplay caught up to it. At launch, though, the reception was pretty mixed to negative. Critics tended to like the concept but criticized the shallow combat and repetition. At this point, Dynasty Warriors was starting to get a reputation for just recycling its ideas and getting its usual 5, 6s, and occasionally on a good day a 7 out of 10. Fans were intrigued, but the enthusiasm for this game was muted, probably because, once again, Gundam is kind of a strange concept to go for with the Musou series. In hindsight though, Dynasty Warriors Gundam 1 feels less like a finished product and more like a rough prototype. A little ambitious, but clearly unfinished and unrealized. So for Dynasty Warriors Gundam 1, it feels like a prototype wrapped up in a full release. The ideas are there, the roster was exciting for fans with things like Master Gundam, God Gundam, and of course Wing, but the execution just felt unfinished almost. Controls were awkward and the combat lacked depth even for Dynasty Warriors. The official mode did try to retell the Gundam timeline for the UC era at moments, but without the narrative weight that you'd expect from the source material. It felt almost like set dressing rather than storytelling. And in hindsight, the first entry works better as a time capsule. It reveals how ambitious Koei and Namco Bandai were at the time, even if they didn't quite stick the landing. Dynasty Warriors Gundam 2, though, feels like the true form of what the first game was trying to be. Everything is significantly enhanced here. The visuals, performance, and especially the gameplay. Combat flows a lot more naturally, attacks chain better, and instead of endlessly repeating the same combo, the game finally adds charge attacks and variations that make combat feel way more dynamic and the characters feel more iconic and alive than they were before. If Dynasty Warriors Gundam 1 was the proof of concept, then Part 2 feels like the true form of what the first game was trying to be. Everything here is just significantly enhanced. Visuals, performance, and especially the gameplay. Combat flow here is just a lot more natural and attacks chain better, and instead of endlessly repeating the same square button combo, the game finally adds some charge attacks for later levels. All that variation just makes the game feel a lot more dynamic. The roster also expands dramatically, and while the mobile armors are not playable, their inclusion as large-scale bosses adds lots of spectacle and helps the battles feel more Gundam appropriate, at least in theory. And this is also where the grind in the Dynasty Warriors Gundam games becomes intentional. There's far more to unlock, and the progression systems are way deeper. And while the grind in this game is pretty long, it's satisfying enough if you're invested. But there is still some lingering clunkiness here. Hit detection is weird, camera issues, and Musou jank as it was dubbed back in the day. But it's much easier to overlook all of this considering that this is the true foundation of the franchise solidified. Reception at the time too is reflected in these improvements. Reviews were a little warmer, word of mouth was stronger, and for many players, this is the moment where the series finally took off. So if Dynasty Warriors Gundam 1 was the rough draft, then Part 2 is the real turning point for the series. Omega Force tightened the screws all over the place in this game. The combat feels more rewarding and responsive, the grind became genuinely rewarding with having to go for extra parts and equipment and unlocking skills that add all kinds of abilities. All of these are things that actually carried on into other Dynasty Warriors franchise games in the future. This sequel is where the series just honestly found its footing. The roster expanded, mission variety increased, and suddenly the formula just kind of clicked for a lot of people. It became one of those comfort food games that you could sink hours and hours and hours into. Also, this is something I didn't know, but when this game was released in Japan, it was the Gundam 30th anniversary, and this was placed in a priority position for that event. With Dynasty Warriors Gundam 2 being a highlight of the 30th Gundam anniversary, it just kind of shows how much faith they had in this game. For a long time, Dynasty Warriors Gundam 3 was my personal favorite of the franchise, and replaying it now, I'm super relieved and happy that it held up after all of these years. It's honestly where the series just hits its stride. Its visuals are excellent, the gameplay is faster, and everything just flows together a lot more smoothly. The combat feels confident and responsive and stylish. And speaking of the visuals, this time around they changed things up. They go for a more cel-shaded look, and it scales amazingly with an emulator. I highly recommend checking it out and bumping up the resolution. It is kind of shocking how good this game still looks. The mobile suits here feel distinct, and stages are better paced, if not significantly shorter. The game finally delivers that consistent Musou satisfaction. That said, it's not perfect. The number of stages in terms of how they look is pretty limited here. Nothing is distinctly Jabrao, distinctly Shangri-La, distinctly Side 7, or whatever unique and notable place in the Gundam franchise. They're just kind of facsimiles of these places, like this might be a colony, this might be that base that gets attacked in the opening of Gundam 0080, maybe? But there's also some strange choices with the character roster in this one. Some of the iconic suits are here, like the Wing Gundam, of course, and we finally get the addition of like Death Scythe and Heavy Arms, but then there's the Tallgeese too, but no Sandrock and no Ultron. Strange choices like that kind of abound in this game, and it's pretty inconsistent as expected from a franchise that has so many characters that you can choose from, honestly. But still, some of the choices just felt odd, no matter which way you think about it. But Dynasty Warriors Gundam 3 thankfully doesn't overstay its welcome. It knows exactly what it is, it delivers strong gameplay, and moves on. It's easy to understand why so many fans consider this the height of the series. Gundam 3 is often regarded as the peak of the series, where the raw spectacle finally met the polish. Combat felt like it had some real weight to it, the mobile suits felt distinct, and stages finally flowed together in ways that felt rewarding for strategic elements and with the button mashing. One of the things I forgot to mention was how stages had different areas that had different effects on the game map. Like, you could use a launcher to go to the other side of the map if you're getting attacked, you can get revives by taking over certain bases, so on and so forth. It's a small thing, but it added a lot. Critically though, it had mixed reviews, but I think that split says more about the general feeling about Dynasty Warriors and Musou fatigue among the reviewers at the time instead of the actual quality. Remember, this is at the time when Dynasty Warriors was releasing its main game of Dynasty Warriors, then Samurai Warriors, then Dynasty Warriors Gundam, and then I think at this time some of the other anime franchises started to come along too with the Dynasty Warriors franchise. So I kind of understand where the critics were coming from at this point, especially if they were one who had to review all of them, especially when the games are coming out multiple times a year. But among the community, this endured as one of the fan favorites, and once again, one of my personal favorites. Looking at the Eurogamer review from way back then, I was actually surprised that they recommended this game. They recommended it as an entry point for newcomers, and I think that speaks to how well this game balanced its accessibility with depth at the time. And now it's time to talk about Dynasty Warriors Gundam Reborn. The only one that I had barely played before, and I'll admit it, I was wrong about this game. This is the best Dynasty Warriors Gundam title, bar none. Visually, it is a slight downgrade in my opinion, but the gameplay more than makes up for it. The combat is fast, furious, and arguably even better than Dynasty Warriors Gundam 3, even though I don't like to admit that. The camera is pulled back a little bit, so it allows for significantly more units on screen. It makes the battles feel larger and more chaotic, but that smaller scale of your character and the downgrade from not using the cel-shaded look anymore, it kind of sucks in my opinion, but I kinda understand too. They were able to do so much more just by changing the visual style a little bit. Story mode returns in this one, which is something that Dynasty Warriors 3 removed, opting for a completely original set of stories. This time around, it includes Gundam Unicorn and Gundam Seed Destiny having a little more play in the story overall. The playable roster here is way bigger too. Many second and third tier characters from Gundam Seed especially finally appear, though there are some odd omissions once again. Ultimate mode though offers a huge number of stages and fun team-ups that are original and not canon to anything, though they do lose some flair due to the limited voice acting. Even so, it's addictive and I found it genuinely hard to put this game down even though it is 2025 and there's way better Dynasty Warriors games to play at this point. As the final entry, Reborn feels like the series kind of realizing its potential, even if it didn't get the send-off it quite deserved. I actually had this game as my very first PlayStation Vita game when I moved to Japan. I was like, I'm gonna buy a Vita and I'm gonna buy Dynasty Warriors because I love Dynasty Warriors and you can't go wrong with Dynasty Warriors. But playing it on the Vita with a smaller screen and worse performance, it felt like something I wasn't going to enjoy. And I honestly only put maybe 20 minutes into it, so this is an entry that I've been longing to play, and I even considered rebuying a PlayStation 3 right after I played it on the Vita, but I was like, well, maybe they'll have a PlayStation 4 version. They never did. But I played it on an emulator this time, and 60 FPS, 1440p locked, no dips, no nothing. It is pretty great. Reborn feels like both a refinement and a strange swan song to the series. It improves mechanics in some ways and trims content in others. It feels less like a celebration and more like an evolution, but without a lot of momentum behind it. I actually really had a great time with this one. As I said, I had a hard time putting it down once I started playing it. It plays very smoothly, its gameplay is an evolution of Dynasty Warriors Gundam 3's very addictive, explosion-based gameplay. It has lots of new abilities and some really fun additional characters this time around. I really like some of the weird mobile suits in Gundam Seed, like Calamity, and Calamity is playable in this one, so I was freaking out about that. But one of the things I kind of had a troubling time with in this one is how things are unlocked. This game takes its sweet time with unlocks, and it's kind of okay because there's so many stages, but I was really looking forward to playing Calamity and Buster Gundam, and I was like, how do I unlock these exactly? And you have to go through quite a few steps to do so. Another thing I really liked about this one is the added side quest or kind of small objectives for each stage. It's things like destroy a certain amount of mobile suits or finish the stage in a certain amount of time and you get a little medal for doing so, and when you do that you unlock certain things. So it's a fun way to add value to each stage and each replay. The fact that this one released so quietly and largely flew under the radar in a lot of places just kind of shows how the series' spotlight had dimmed by this point, even though the foundation was stronger than ever, honestly. Its existence is almost like a hidden gem. It's something that modern fans returning to the series might find incredibly interesting if they didn't play it at the time. It's really fun, and I personally, once again, had a hard time putting it down. Even though I have a huge backlog of other games to play, this is one that just like, it hooked me in a way that I wasn't expecting, and I kept playing it even though my streams were over, even though I had all the footage I wanted for this video. I just kind of kept coming back to it. That's why this video is a little late, so. So there's no dramatic cancellation story behind Dynasty Warriors Gundam. Licensing Gundam is just really expensive, obviously, and the Musou games were oversaturating the market. Koei Tecmo has since shifted focus for franchises with more brand appeal globally. One Piece, Zelda, and Fire Emblem even. But Dynasty Warriors Gundam remains a beloved franchise for a lot of people. It's a series that I personally loved, and it's a franchise that I personally love. Thankfully, Gundam has seen a resurgence in recent years with the success of things like G-Witch and Gundam movies actually being pretty good now with Hathaway. At Tokyo Game Show 2013 even, this game that was eventually called Dynasty Warriors Gundam Reborn was featured alongside Gundam Breaker, just kind of showing that Namco Bandai, or was it Bandai Namco at the time? They swapped names a few times. But either way, it shows that confidence in the Gundam brand for making video games with it. Since then, we've gotten dozens and dozens of different Gundam-based video games, but there's something about Dynasty Warriors Gundam that really stood out. And you even see the Dynasty Warriors Gundam series influencing Gundam Breaker in its later entries. At these events too, they even had voice actors, and they showed off the Ultimate mode where they announced that over 120 playable mobile suits would be here. It just really showed that Bandai Namco had so much confidence in their Gundam-based video games at the time. And thankfully, like I mentioned, the series and franchise has just been growing over time. I think it was G-Witch that had its most profitable season of Gundam plastic models in decades. It's just like, it shows how much power Gundam has nowadays. At release, these games were often dismissed as repetitive, shallow, or overly fan service driven, a common criticism of Musou games at the time. Today, that sentiment has kind of shifted. These titles are remembered as comfort games, nostalgia machines, and sincere celebrations of Gundam. With no remasters, no HD collection, and no modern Gundam Musou, these games feel even more special now than they did when they were new. So, the second and third entries had so many fans praising them, but critics often focus on the repetition and lack of narrative weight, a common Musou critique. Critics also missed the intrinsic appeal of what these games have for both fans of Gundam and Musou games, treating them as if it's a one-size-fits-all thing in a review sense. In online communities today though, there's a strong nostalgic push for remasters or new entries in this franchise. A second-hand interest continues to be bubbling on Reddit and fan forums, evidence of the series' lasting appeal. Many fans speculate that the lack of remasters isn't because the interest is gone, but because of licensing complexity and shifting priorities with Koei and Bandai Namco, which is a common barrier for licensed multi-timeline franchises like this. So at this point, we still do get Gundam games. We get them from Bandai Namco basically every year at this point, whether they're remasters like we got last year, whether they're completely new original games like the SD Battle Alliance game that we got several years ago, or even just sequels to games that have been tried and true over the last few years, like the Gundam Breaker series. But at this point, we're getting these very established games, but we're not getting Dynasty Warriors Gundam, and I think that's a really big shame. It's clearly a series that worked up to a certain point. When this game kind of stopped being made, Bandai Namco was still reaching out for various games in the Gundam franchise, like we have EX Versus, we have a couple of other games that are in the arcade and still active even today. But for what happened to Koei Tecmo, I think their oversaturation of the market with the Warriors titles just kind of really did a number on this one. And sadly, Dynasty Warriors Gundam was one of the victims of this. We saw the reviews kind of plateau, we saw a general user and reviewer sentiment just kind of plateau as well. Everyone kind of knew what we were getting, and even though these games were getting better over time, as we saw in this little retrospective that I did, it didn't really help that people were just burned out on these games at this point. Even now, Dynasty Warriors has had a really massive reboot of its franchise and series with Dynasty Warriors Origins, which is not only maybe the highest rated one in the entire catalog, but maybe one of the best Dynasty Warriors games ever made. So I think they're kind of primed to take another look at the series that they've already had partnerships with, like Gundam, but also look to the future for future partnerships. I know one of the big ones everyone always talks about is Final Fantasy or even Star Wars. So hopefully someday we'll see further collaborations with the Dynasty Warriors brand. I would love to see that. But also, I hope we see Dynasty Warriors Gundam come back, because it is a series that I think put enough nails in the, how do I want to say this? It put enough nails in the structure or the scaffolding of what Dynasty Warriors would become that I think it deserves to have another entry in its series. And also, Gundam is a series that has not stopped since then. There have been a number of entries in the Gundam pantheon since this game stopped being made. We've had Iron-Blooded Orphans, which would be an amazing entry. We've gotten G-Witch, we've gotten G-Quox this year, which divisive, needless to say, but Gundam hasn't stopped, and we've gotten plenty of extra characters, machines, and possibility for it to return. And especially with, like I mentioned, the reboot of the Dynasty Warriors franchise with Origins and kind of the new gameplay concepts and kind of fulfilling the premise and idea of having this flood of enemies appear, I think Gundam would be a slam dunk entry to kind of bring back. But also, just because people are looking forward to more Gundam stuff, G-Witch brought a lot of people into the franchise, and the newest movies, Hathaway, are just good movies in general. So I think we're primed for more Gundam games in general, and some better budgeted ones, hopefully, because Bandai Namco seems to have a cap on their anime franchises for games, and when they hit that cap, you can really tell. And not all of the games are bad. I really enjoyed SD Battle Alliance, but it is what it is. So playing these titles now, it feels like discovering a bridge between two worlds, one built on my love of the Gundam franchise and the other built on my love for the Musou series. I think the series shone most when it stopped trying to be a Gundam anthology and just tried to be a celebration of the power, fantasy, and nonsense that is Gundam. Whereas a lot of licensed games feel shallow, these Musou titles, even at their worst, had a sense of ambition in them at the time, and you can kind of see that when you play them in succession like I did. And maybe the reason fans still talk about these games isn't just nostalgia, it's because they were genuinely pretty good. So, I hope you enjoyed this retrospective look at Dynasty Warriors Gundam and everything it just kind of is. I've got individual impression videos for all of the games up on the channel, so please check those out. Just a fair warning, they're unscripted and untimed or anything. I just kind of turned the mic on and was telling my thoughts about it, and I might upload a few streams of it as well, so check those out if you're interested. But yeah, let me know down in the comments below, what is your favorite Dynasty Warriors Gundam game, and is there another game that you think that I should check out that is older, and maybe you're just kind of curious about what my opinions of it are. I'm thinking Final Fantasy 13. but I have to beat Rebirth, honestly, because it's been a year since Rebirth came out, and I am dodging so many spoilers recently that I'm just like, I have to finish this because this is ridiculous at this point. Either way, I'm Brian at Valkerion Gaming. Please hit the sub button and the bell and all that good stuff, and let me know down below what you think of this video and what you want to see next. Let me know. Either way, have a good end of the year, because today is Christmas, actually. I have to call my mom, so do that. Call your mom, be nice to your family, and see you next time. Peace.